All sports, all plays. Yeah. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we're making up plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Around the Bases here on Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. Man, I still can't believe it's October already, Dustin. This year's flown by.
It has.
Crazy, just a couple months away from Christmas and the new year already. It's like, damn. But, oh, man, we got a lot of baseball stuff going on. Got just 2 days left in the regular season, and we'll have a day off, and then the wild card round start on Friday. But before we get into that, how you doing this morning? Joined by the stat guy as always.
I'm doing well. All I can say is Sacramento Kings, you are up next. Now the Sacramento Kings officially have the longest playoff drought in professional sports now that the Seattle Mariners are in the playoffs.
I think I hate to say it for Sacramento, but I think the Kings is going to be a while still before they make the playoffs. They've been trying to change the culture of there and build a team, but man, for one, the West is tough, and then I don't know. I know real quick before we get into the baseball. Do you think the Kings might move out of Sacramento?
I don't think they'll move out of Sacramento. I just think they've talked about it before, but now that we hear that NBA is expanding to Seattle and Las Vegas, there's no reason to move them out of Sacramento because now you're just going to be adding the two teams anyways.
Yeah, that's true. But all right, man, you excited about the baseball playoffs coming up on Friday?
I actually am very excited about the playoffs this year just because there's a lot of parity this year. You have teams like Seattle making the playoffs for the first time since 2001. Philadelphia got in for the first time since 2011. Mets got in for the first time since 2015 or 2016. Cardinals are back in. Braves are back in. Dodgers are back in. Blue Jays are back in for just the second time since 2016. Tampa Bay is now gone 4 straight years. Cleveland's gone like 3 of the last 4. So, yes, you have your typical usuals like your Yankees, your Astros, your Dodgers, and your Braves like that. But the other half of the playoff field, you can say, is relatively new. Yes, like some of these teams have made it the last couple of years, but teams like the Blue Jays and the Mets and the Phillies and the Mariners are teams that haven't made it in a while that finally got back in.
Yeah. No, I'm interested in seeing how the Mariners do because I know they're not a favorite. But man, I'm telling you, they could be one of them sleeper teams that if their pitching staff or their bats get hot with that pitching staff they have, they could cause some teams some trouble. I think in a 5 game or 7 game series.
Yeah, their only issue is that I think they got to go to Toronto for that first round, which Toronto's kind of in a similar spot as Seattle, where obviously they have the bats that are going to do damage, but if their starting pitching continues to pitch the way they've pitched since the end of July, Toronto's going to be a tough out.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of parity. I think you have 4 or 5 teams in each league that are capable of going on a deep playoff run and getting to the World Series. I mean, you got, like you said, you have your favorites with like the Yankees and Astros and Dodgers, Mets, Blue Jays. I think should be up there as a favorite, which I know you have them as a favorite because you've had them you've been on the Blue Jays the whole season.
Yeah.
But then you got, like you said, you have your teams even like the Cardinals in the National League. They're a team that can get hot and be dangerous.
Yeah, in the National League, I think right now I think a lot of people say it's still going to be the Dodgers and the field pretty much in the National League. I personally think it's the Dodgers and Mets, the Dodgers and Braves, and then kind of everybody else behind that. But if you look at the American League, I think Cleveland has the worst shot of anybody to make it to the World Series. But they have a shot to make it to the World Series because they have the pitching that can get them there.
Yep. Yeah, so what you're saying, I'm pretty sure I agree with it too, is that you think the American League's a little more open than the National League.
I think, like I said, I think the National League is like a 2, maybe a 3-team race versus I think any one of the 6 teams in the American League can come out of the American League just because they all have strong pitching stats for the most part. A lot of the teams obviously have very good offenses, and it's going to come down to playoff experience where take Seattle out of that mix. All the teams in the American League have been in the playoffs at least since 2017, so it's still relatively familiar ground for all of them.
You know, we were talking last night a little bit about it. We got talking about Seattle having been in the playoffs for like 21 years, and I got thinking, I was like, to put in perspective how long that is, fuck, I was 21 years old last time the Mariners was in the playoffs.
Yep.
I was like, damn, that's a long time. Because when you just say 20, 21 years, like, yeah, that's a long time.
21 years, 2001, which is the year they won the 116 games.
Yeah, I think if you just say, 21 years, that's a long time. But then if you start thinking about it, it's like, oh, yeah, that's almost half my life. I mean, aging myself a little bit, but it's like, damn.
Right.
Tony Lewis is not going to be back with the White Sox. I'm sure that doesn't surprise you after the season the White Sox had.
I don't think it surprises anybody, especially when you look at the season that the White Sox had last year. And they had a great season last year. I think they won 92 or 93 games last year, ended up winning the AL Central. But the final 2 weeks of the season, the White Sox did not play well last year. And they ended up going from the 2 seed in the American League down to the 3 seed. And instead of having Houston come to Chicago for the first 2 games, Chicago had to go to Houston for the first 2 games, fell behind 2-0, and that was pretty much the series at that point. You look at this year, outside of maybe the Houston Astros, the White Sox, I think, had higher expectations than anybody to do very well this year. I think they even had higher expectations than what the Yankees had. I think they had higher expectations than any team in the American League not named Houston. And a lot of people were picking the White Sox as a World Series contender because of how young their talent is, how good some of their starting pitchers are, like Dylan Cease, Lucas Giolito, Lance Lynn, and some of those guys. And just looking at the way they played in 2021 and just a lot of those players starting to come into their own. And they never, at any point in the season, you can argue maybe for that 1 or 2 week stretch in September where they pulled within 1 game of the Guardians, was kind of when it felt like the White Sox were going to take off. But as the moment they got within a game, they ended up losing 8 in a row and went from 1 game out to 7 games out, and that was pretty much it. And that was kind of what the sense was all year, where everyone was just kind of holding on to their seats. Like the White Sox were playing so bad all season, but yet they kept themselves within 3 or 4 games of that division lead, and everyone kept saying that all it's going to take is 1 hot streak for the White Sox, and the division's going to be theirs. And the problem was that hot streak really never came.
No, they had their chance winning it last week where they played 4 or 5 games against the Guardians, or it might have been the week before.
Guardians took, I think, 4 of the 5, and
that was basically their last chance to make that playoff push to get in.
Yep.
Try to get that division. But where do you think they went wrong? Do you think it's all on La Russa, or was it some injuries that played part of it as well? Or
I'm putting 50% of it on the injuries, because they did have a lot of injuries here. They had Michael Kopech was injured for a good chunk of the second half. The Lance Lynn missed the first month and a half of the season. Jimenez, Luis Robert, Tim Anderson, Yasmani Grandal, a lot of their players missed at least 40, 50 games this year. And then you had guys like Lucas Giolito, who posted an ERA over a 5 this year, which you can't have from the guy that's supposed to be your ace.
Yeah.
I'm putting 40% of the blame on Tony La Russa just because he tries to manage the game now like it's back in the early 2000s, which you can't do anymore. As much as you want to and as much as you think you can, baseball is a completely different game than what it was 15, 20 years ago when he last managed. He's got to get that through his head and realize that I can't do the things that I used to do when I was with St. Louis, or the things I used to do when I was with the White Sox the first time around, because it doesn't work anymore. And then the other 10%, I'm not going to say blame Rick Hahn or Jerry Reinsdorf, but it's just kind of one of those situations where, yes, the White Sox have all this talent. Yes, the White Sox spent so much money to get this talent, But it's one of those cases where the talent just might not fit well together. They might not be able to just be on this team together because some of them are getting older in age, some of them are still young but injury prone. Like, they have a very talented team, and no one's going to deny that. It's just maybe the talent is not where it needs to be, or the talent just doesn't gel together.
Yeah, and with La Russa, I think I agree with you. He's older, so he still manages the game like he used to. And a lot of people say, "Oh, he's a terrible manager." He's not a terrible manager. Lusa was a hell of a manager.
I mean, second most wins all time, most
Yeah.
World Series appearances of any manager. Obviously, he's not a terrible manager. It's just there's a reason why he's been out. There's a reason why he was out of managing for 10 years.
Yeah. At some point, time catches up with you because, like you said, the game changes, and you're out of baseball for 10 years, and sometimes it's hard for older guys, or just older people in general to be able to change their ways with the game, especially when you're away from it for 10 years. I think it'd been different if he had been around the whole time. I was hoping it'd work out for him because, like you said, he's a great man. He was a great manager, and I'd really like to seen him succeed there in White Sox. But then with some of the stuff he had with the DUI and some of the other problems he had when he first got there, I just think it kind of all just kept kind of piling on each other until it just came to a head. They're saying that he's stepping down because of health issues, but I think they were going to get rid of him either way.
I do too, but it is. I mean, health reasons is part of it, but I don't think he would have been brought back next year, especially when you look at how much expectations that team had this year, and to finish, they could possibly finish under 500. I think because I think they're 80-80 right now. They could possibly finish under 500, which would just be a travesty when you look at the kind of roster that they put together. But, I mean, this is one of those situations where you got to feel for Rick Renteria also. Because Rick Renteria went through the same situation when he was with the Chicago Cubs, where he went to the Cubs in 2014 when they were rebuilding, had a bunch of young, talented prospects get called up, and all of a sudden they started to play well the second half of the year. And all of a sudden, the Cubs said, well, we're going to get rid of you now, hire Joe Madden, and look what happened. Rick Renteria goes to the White Sox, kind of goes through the whole rebuilding phase with the White Sox to get all these top prospects like Jimenez and Roberts. The moment they get called up, they can him for Tony La Russa.
Yeah. Damien says, bring back Ozzie, please. I don't know if Ozzie will end up back with the White Sox.
I mean, that is the talk right now. That is like the big talk right now, and I know a lot of White Sox fans are kind of up, not really up in the air about it, but they're kind of 50-50 on it just because, yes, Ozzie Guillen was a great manager for them. He got them to the World Series in 2005 and got them the World Series championship back then, but you look at the end of his tenure with the White Sox didn't end very well. And that was when they had to hire Robin Ventura as their manager and some of these other managers. His final 2-3 years with the White Sox didn't go well, and I think that's what a lot of the fans are worried about. That is, if they do bring back Ozzie Guillen, what Guillen are you going to get? Are you going to get the one that got you guys to the World Series in 2005, or are you going to get the one where the last 2-3 years of his tenure were just kind of downhill and just nothing good came from it?
Damien says our front office is the problem. We have an owner that has too much on his hands dealing with the Bulls and the White Sox. He needs to let one of them go. I don't think it's as much as that because, I mean, yeah, he owns both teams, but you have front offices that manage both them teams. So, I mean,
yeah, you own both teams, but you still have Rick Hahn making a lot of the decisions for the White Sox, and then you have Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley making all those decisions for the Bulls. So, yes, you own the team, but outside of hiring the head coach and hiring the GM and whatnot, Jerry Reinsdorf really doesn't make any decisions in that organization. He hired Rick Hahn to be the GM, but Hahn's the one that makes all the signings. He's the one that ultimately decides what the team's going to look like. Reinsdorf just has to sign off on the contracts.
Yeah, he's not involved in all like the day-to-day operations like that. The GM takes care of that. Hey, what's up, Jordan Bell? Thanks for joining us, man. And then this, Damien said La Russa equals Urban Meyer. That's not a good to me. That's not a great comparison at all.
No.
LaRusse has had a lot of success in Major League Baseball. Meyer hasn't had the success in the NFL. Urban Meyer's tenure last year in the NFL didn't go well and didn't even last a year. And LaRusse has had some problems there in Chicago, but to me, that's not even near the same situation. At least, like you said, LaRusse was what? Did you say the second all time in wins?
Yeah, he's second behind Connie Mack all time in victories.
Yeah, so you can't compare him to Urban Meyer.
No, and he's gotten what? Oakland to the World Series a couple times. He's gotten the White Sox to the World Series. He's gotten the Cardinals to plenty of World Series. So he's taken 3 different teams to the World Series.
Yeah. I'd take him. I'd take him in Cincinnati over David Bell. Be honest with you.
Yeah.
Then Andre says, "What's up with Soto?"
As in what?
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. As in what? I'm not 100% sure on that.
As in his struggles since he's gone to San Diego, or
well, real quick, why do you think he struggled so bad since he's been in San Diego?
Getting acclimated to a new team, it just takes time. Yeah. Just fitting in with that clubhouse, fitting in with the different mindset, different environment, going from the worst team in the National League in the Washington Nationals to a team that obviously was competing for a playoff spot all year. It's just a different mindset. Something that's going to take time for him to kind of readjust to.
Yeah, I think people understand, and I think it's even more important in baseball is to have that continuity with your team and have that and be comfortable where you're at. Because in baseball, it's such a hard sport that when you go up to the plate, you got your mind has to be free. You can't be worried about, am I fitting in with this guy, or if I don't get a hit, or if you go up there pressing, you're not going to have near as much success. So I think, and in baseball, I think that's even more important than any of the other major sports.
Yeah, that's kind of what I said when the Padres went out and got Soto, and then they went out and got Josh Hader and gave up all the prospects and all the pieces to get those players. They really didn't care how they finished this season just because the Dodgers had such a big lead at that point anyways. I think the Padres knew that they weren't going to catch them this year. And then you have Tatis getting suspended for 80 games. He's not going to be ready to go until mid-May, I believe, or late May next year at the earliest. But the Padres made the moves they made to prepare for next year. Next year, I think, is kind of when they're going to go all in. They're going to push all their chips to the table and try to really test the Dodgers because they're going to have Soto for the full year. They're going to get Tatis back. They're going to re-sign probably Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish, and a lot of the pieces that they've acquired the last year and a half are going to finally be with that team for a full season.
You think they re-sign Hader?
He's got 1 year left, so they don't have to re-sign him next year. And I'm not even worried about Josh Hader right now. I'm not. It's the same situation that.
I don't say same situation. I think he'll pitch better next year.
Yeah, because if you look at the Brewers were 8 games under 500 when they traded Josh Hader. Say what you want about his struggles with the Padres. Say what you want about how much he struggled that final month of the season with the Brewers. But the reality is they were 8 games under 500 after they made that trade. And the St. Louis Cardinals made up almost 20 games on the Brewers because the Cardinals were 10 games back of Milwaukee, and now they have a 7-game lead.
Yeah, and if you watch a lot of the Brewers games, a lot of their problem, they haven't been last year or so. They haven't been a great hitting team for one, but a lot of their problem after Hader was gone is they didn't have somebody to close out the games when they did have a lead in a close game.
I mean, they had guys like Devin Williams and Taylor Rogers who they traded basically Hader for Rogers, but Taylor Rogers was posting a 4.34 ERA at Petco Park, which is a very pitcher-friendly ballpark. What do you think is going to happen when you go to American Family Insurance Field? That ERA is going to balloon to almost a 5 because it's a launching pad. Devin Williams is viewed as the closer of the future, but he was primarily a setup man this year. And going from a setup man to a closer mid-season is a completely different mindset where some players can do it, some players can't. You look at what happened to Craig Kimbrell last year when he got traded from the Cubs to the White Sox. They took him from the closer and put him as a setup man, and that has messed him up so bad that I don't think he's ever recovered because he's not comfortable in that setup man role. La Russa put him there anyways. Second half of the season, he was terrible. He goes to the Dodgers this year, and he hasn't recovered.
Damon says Urban and La Russa are the same because of their controversies they have away from the field. La Russa with the drinking and Myers with the partying. Okay, I mean, I guess you can make that comparison that way, but like baseball, like manager wise and what they can do with their teams, I don't think you can really make or what they've done.
You don't see Tony La Russa going and throwing baseballs at his pitcher. I mean, Urban Meyer kicked his kicker last year. I mean, Tony La Russa doesn't do things like that.
He just likes to drink a little bit, but back in the day, a lot of those managers were always drinking like that.
Yeah, the guy's 75 years old. He's fine.
Yeah, 75. He wants to have a drink. Let him have a damn drink. Wait, let's talk about Aaron Judge for a minute. You think Judge is going to get to 62 here in these last two games?
I think he'll get it the last day. I don't think he needs it at this point because he's tied Roger Maris. I think that was kind of the load off of his shoulder. I mean, I think he wants number 62 just because he'd stand alone at that point. I think he gets to number 62 that final game of the year, but I don't even think he's worried about it at this point. I think he just wants to be ready to go for the playoffs since they're going to have that first round bye and that extra 4 days off where he's not going to be seeing pitching for about 4 or 5 days.
First round bye is nice because it helps your especially if you have some injuries and stuff and help your team recover, gives you a little bit of rest. But also, I think it can work the other way, just like you just mentioned, not seeing pitching for 4 or 5 days. Sometimes your teams can come out slow on the offensive side of the ball, and sometimes your pitchers can come out slow, especially if they haven't pitched for 8-9 days.
Yeah, and that's my biggest fear right now with teams like the Yankees and the Astros and the Braves and the Dodgers, where you have the 3 wild card teams, then the lowest seeded divisional winner. They're only going to get 1 day off from the end of the season to when the playoffs start, so they can pretty much continue using the rotation they have right now, have that day off, and then get right into playoff mode versus the other teams are going to have 4 or 5 days off between the end of the season and their first playoff game. And you've seen it plenty of times where the more rest you have, the more likely it is that you're not in rhythm when the playoffs start, and you don't want that.
No. Nope. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Judge will get it. I think he'll at least get one more. I think I've seen some guys that they just want to blame it all on Judge. He's not gotten the 62, or he hasn't got or he didn't get the Triple Crown. But a lot of, for one, he wouldn't get a lot of great pitches. But if the guys behind him was hitting the ball better and protecting them, he wouldn't get walked as much for one, and he would have more opportunity. Would have had more opportunities to hit the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Better pitches. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think that's like what you said perfectly. If guys behind Judge were smoking the baseball, Anthony Rizzo's got 30-some home runs, and John Carlos Stanton's got 30 home runs, but they're both hitting under 220. So I think obviously pitchers are going to take their chances with those guys hitting 220 as opposed to Judge, who's leading the American League Triple Crown right now.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to explain to a couple guys the other night. It's like, yeah, I understand his batting averages went down, but they're pitching him away with breaking balls. He's not getting a lot of great pitches to hit. And it's the same with like Barry Bonds when they didn't have nobody to protect him. They're just going to walk you. They're going to make somebody else beat it. It's just in the other sport.
And
we have to stop Derek Henry.
Yeah, and more often than not, Barry Bonds' teammates weren't going to beat you. At least Aaron Judge has some protection top to bottom in that lineup where other guys can beat you, but it's still not going to be the same type of production that Aaron Judge would give you.
I just want consistent enough, I don't think. But yeah. So matchup these wildcard games are you looking for most forward to?
In the National League, I'm very intrigued by the Mets and the Padres right now, and mainly because I want to see if the Mets can kind of recover from this little collapse that they've had at the end, even though they will have Scherzer back for that series and they will have DeGrom back for that series. I want to see the perfect storybook ending, I guess. As much as I hate the Cardinals, you have guys like Albert Pujols, Adam Wainwright, and Yadier Molina all retiring after the end of this year. Having them go out on top, I think, would be awesome for the game of baseball, especially with you have Pujols, 702 home runs right now. Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina have not only started the most combined games together for a pitcher-catcher duo, but they've caught the most innings ever for a pitcher-catcher duo. So you have all those records to look at. But the series that I'm looking forward to the most is Toronto and Seattle. I just think that's going to be a very high-scoring series. A lot of home runs. It's going to be a very fun series because of all the young talent that's going to be on that field, from Julio Rodriguez to Vlad Guerrero, Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio. I mean, just the list goes on for the type of players that you're going to see in that series.
And then you have some good pitchers in that series as well.
Yeah, Gausman and Alek Manoah versus Luis Castillo and Robbie Ray.
So the wild card games are set, right? Like there can't be no changes these last two games, I don't think.
The National League, the National League's set in stone where Padres get the 5, Philly gets the 6, and then the Mets or the Braves get the 4, which is looking like the Mets are going to get the 4. So the National League, the way it looks right now is how it's going to look. If you go to the American League right now, I believe
we got Rays at 6, Guardians at 3, Mariners at 5, and Blue Jays at 4.
Yeah, the only thing that can change in the American League is Seattle and Tampa. Where if Seattle would lose their final 2 games and Tampa would win their final 2 games, Tampa Bay would leapfrog them. But outside of that, nothing in the American League can change either because Toronto's got a 5-game lead over Seattle for that number 4 spot. So yeah, the only seeds that can actually change at this point are literally Tampa Bay and Seattle. Otherwise, everything is locked in as to who they're going to play.
From the Mariners, I think I'd rather play the Guardians than the Blue Jays.
And I think that's right now. What you just said is exactly why I think Tampa Bay is going to rest a lot of their players today and tomorrow, because they kind of have the decision to make. Do you take your chances with the Guardians in a best of 3? Or do you take your chances with the Blue Jays in a best of 3? Pretty sure they'll take their chances with the Guardians over the Blue Jays.
That'd be to me, that'd be the smart move. I know a lot of people don't like that. Oh, you should try to finish as high as you can. And when you get down to the final 2 games like that, you got to start looking ahead to your schedule in the playoffs. You want to get the best matchup you can get.
Exactly.
And I'd rather definitely, especially in a 3-game series, I'd definitely rather play the Guardians than the Blue Jays.
Yeah.
I think the Mariners and Blue Jays, if that's what it is, I'm interested in that. And I'm also going to be interested in I think the Phillies and Cardinals could be a decent 3-game series.
Yeah.
But the one I'm really going to be interested in is if the Mets beat the Padres, and it's Mets and Dodgers there in the National League Division Series. That's going to be a hell of a National League Division Series.
Yeah, it would be.
That matchup.
And then if it ended up being Mets and the Braves in the NLCS.
Yep. Yeah, because they just had a real good series over the weekend.
Yep. Obviously, the Braves swept them and overtook the NL East, but you're going to have Scherzer, you're going to have DeGrom both back, you're going to have Spencer Strider, whatever his name is, pitching for the Braves with Charlie Morton and all those other guys. I mean, that series has the makings to be a 6 or 7-game classic. You have the potential of Toronto playing the Yankees in the ALCS, the potential of the Rays playing the Yankees, the Rays playing the Astros, who've always given the Astros problems in the ALCS. I mean, there's so many intriguing matchups. Seattle could end up playing the Astros if they came out of that wild card round. I mean, there's so many intriguing matchups in both of the playoffs for the first 2 rounds that I think it's going to be very similar to 2020 when they had the 8-team playoff in that best of 3 series where every game you never knew what to expect. And there was going to be so many upsets, and I think all it's going to take is kind of going back to the Mets and even – I mean, you could say Seattle's too, for example, with Luis Castillo and Robbie Ray as your top two. Those two as your top two are good enough to take out an Astros team. They're good enough to take out a Yankees team where if they can steal 1 or 2 games with those guys, they can really shake the playoffs up in a hurry.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. I know a lot of fans think that the Astros would definitely want to play the Mariners over the Blue Jays. Well, I agree the Blue Jays are probably a little more dangerous, but with the Mariners pitching staff, if they get their bats get going. They're a team. They're a team. I think people don't want to see.
No, exactly.
I think them picking up Castillo at the trade deadline was a great move to go along with a lot of these young players they have. And Julio Rodriguez, he's back, isn't he? Or going to be? I know he's going to be back, isn't he?
I think he's back. He's been on limited duty the last couple days, but he will be full go when the playoffs start on Friday.
So as long as his back isn't bothering him real bad, he can be himself. Man, Mariners can be a team that I think people are overlooking a little bit. I understand why people are overlooking them. They haven't been in playoffs for 21 years. They're a young team, but man, I mean, in the playoffs, a lot of times it comes down to your pitching, and they have pitching.
Yeah, and if you look at the teams that have made the playoffs this year, a lot of the managers now are getting younger, and a lot of the managers are former players. Like Aaron Boone was a former player, Kevin Cash was a former player, Scott Service was a former player, Oliver Marmol was only a minor league player, but he was still a former player. Dave Roberts. I mean, Joe Girardi was the manager of the Phillies until they fired him, but there's so many former players that are managers now. I mean, the managers are getting younger. Obviously, the analytics side of things have played into things, but I really like the direction baseball's going, as long as we do not go into another lockout in 5 years again. Because if we go into another one, I don't know what's going to happen, but as long as they can avoid that, I really like the direction the game is going, because you have so many of these managers who are getting younger. You have a lot of these former players that are being turned into managers that are having instant success, that it's great for the game.
On this day in 1922, the entire World Series was broadcasted over the radio for the first time. That's a neat little stat in history.
Yeah.
What do you think about Pujols, the way he's finishing out his career up to 703? Every time I see him play now, I can hit the ball like he is. I'm like, man, I wish he'd play. We'll still go play a couple more years. But I also like getting to see him go out the way he's going out. But maybe I think if he played a couple more years, he could really make a push at going after the home run record. Isn't there like 760?
760 for
career home runs, and like
763.
763
is what Bonds has, and Hank Aaron has 756.
So, I mean, yeah, if he played 2 or 3 more seasons, he'd have a chance at it.
Yeah, I don't think he will.
No,
I think he's pretty much made it clear that even if he didn't get the 700, this was it. But then he started to get closer and closer, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, is he going to do it?" Well, now he's number 2 all time in RBIs. So I mean, the guy is top 4 in home runs all time, number 2 all time in RBIs. Even with the last 5-6 years of hitting in the 240s, he's still a 280 career hitter. I mean, the guy's got to be considered one of the top 5 hitters in Major League Baseball history. He has to.
Yeah, and if he wouldn't have had the injuries that he had that slowed him down, like you said,
I think he would have had over 800 home runs if he would have been healthy.
He would be would have broke the record for the most home runs in the career.
And if he would have did that, he would have probably been considered the greatest hitter of all time. But even with being where he is, you put him right up there with Ted Williams, with Ty Cobb, and all these great hitters way back in the day. He's got to be considered a top 5 hitter of all time, just because of what he's been able to do for how long that he's done it.
No, I agree. Even though he used to drive me nuts when he was in his younger days with the Cardinals against the Reds all the time. But dude was a hell of a hitter, and definitely should get the respect of that. Like I said, I'd like to see what would have happened if he wouldn't have had battled them injuries. Same way with a guy like Ken Griffey Jr. Just think where his numbers could have been if he wouldn't have been when they had all the injuries later in his career.
Yeah.
It'd just been nice to see where them guys could have got if they just could have stayed healthy. I mean,
Yeah.
Pujols was able to come back and play a little bit.
Or even if Pujols never left St. Louis to begin with.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I wish he would have stayed in St. Louis, played there the whole time instead of going to the Angels. Fucking Reds 61-99. That's just terrible.
Hey, you ended our winning streak last night.
Hunter Green pitched a pretty good game.
Yeah, he did.
Man, when he's on, he's tough. And then sometimes he'll get where he just don't have his control, and he'll groove you right down the middle, with that 100-mile-per-hour fastball that's going 110-mile-per-hour the other way.
Right.
But I think he's going to end up being a real good pitcher. Hopefully with the Reds. But I really do. I think this year was good for him because he got a lot of experience this year. I look for hopefully a big jump in him next season.
Yeah.
Like I said, there was times this year he'd look dominant. Then there's other times you could tell he was a young pitcher.
Yep. I mean, the guy throws 101, 102, and that's kind of what I'm also wondering now. Like, are the Reds planning on using him as a starter long term, or do they plan to go the Jordan Hicks route like the Cardinals did, where you have a guy throwing 101, 102 as a starter? Do you want to use him as a starter, or do you want to maximize that velocity, move him to the bullpen as a closer? They did it with Aroldis Chapman. They've done it with so many flamethrowers in the past, where instead of having this guy come out and throw 90 pitches a game, why not get him for 20-25 where he can just throw 102 plus 90% of the time, then mix in a changeup or a slider every now and then.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're going to do that because, like you said, that because the original plan was with Chapman he was going to be a starter. Then, boom, he was a closer. So I could see them going that route with them, especially if they can bring up some of these other young guys, and some of these other young guys can step in the starting role. Because that Ashcraft, who was a rookie, he looked pretty good for the most part this season for us. So I think he could be a guy that could end up being a good starter for us.
And then you got to look at Luis Sessa too. Like Luis Sessa's been kind of your middle reliever, long reliever all year, but all of a sudden he's been thrown into the rotation the final 2 months of the year, and he could be an option at the back end now.
Yeah, and then Ladulo, or however you pronounce his
name. Ladolo or Ladalo, or yeah.
I think he has potential to end up being a good starter for us. So I could see. Yeah, I agree. I could see them maybe making Green a closer.
I don't think they do. I don't think if they do, I don't think they make that move for
maybe a couple years.
I'd say 2, maybe 3 years until the Reds have more of an established pitching rotation, more of an established roster where they can compete. And then when that happens, I could see that move being made because right now he is their best pitcher. And with him being their best pitcher, you have to have him in that rotation right now. Even if he takes the bumps and bruises that he took this year, you have to put him in there right now because he gives you the best chance to win every 5 days. But let's just say, the next couple of years, obviously the Reds are going to have a top 5 pick next year. Let's just say they get the top college pitcher next year. And then the year after that, they go and get another good college arm. And then all of a sudden now you got a guy like Hunter Green. He'll be going on 25 at that point. Ashcraft will be 27. Lodolo will be around 26. Plus then you have these 22, 23-year-olds you drafted. Now you're in the position where if you want to go and sign some free agent arms, you can. Put them in the back of your rotation. Then you just move Hunter Green to the closer spot. You roll with Ashcraft and Lodolo, and then you start calling up some of the guys that you recently drafted.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because he does, man. I think he's going to be I think he'd be a great closer, especially if he keeps developing that slider of his. I mean, that's what made Chapman made Chapman's fastball was great.
I mean, Chapman didn't even need a secondary pitch at some point because when you're throwing 105, you can just throw it where you want it and no one's going to hit it.
But when you develop that secondary pitch with that slider, that just makes you even almost unhittable at some points when you have your control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the fastest pitch I've ever seen thrown live was 105, and it was Aroldis Chapman.
Yeah, I think who was the pitcher? There was somebody this year in the majors that hit 106. And I can't remember who it was, but it was in the American League this year. They hit 106.
Yeah, I remember somebody hitting 106, but I can't remember who it
It was
was
like
either.
in June or July, I want to say they hit 106.
I think we went to Great American Ball. It was great. Went to Great American Ballpark, and it was Reds versus Cardinals because me, my dad, and my son, and my son's a big St. Louis Cardinals fan, and we were sitting actually almost behind. We was in like the first row of the second level, right behind home plate.
Yep.
I mean, I'll never forget that, dude. Just the pop of the catcher's glove at 105. It's like,
I mean,
damn.
it doesn't even pop; it explodes.
Yeah, it's like, and it's crazy because I mean, with everybody going crazy, you're like, oh, you're not gonna hear it that much, but shit, sounds like a bomb going off.
Yeah, the thing is too, like what they always say about that, like you could be talking to somebody and then looking away and not even like paying attention, but the moment you hear a pitch that fast hit the glove, all of a sudden it's like, what just happened? And you literally turn and you're not going to turn away anymore.
Yeah, everybody's like just stops talking and turns and like, what the hell just happened? And you look up at the radar thing, it's 106. You're like, oh, we need to pay attention. But no, man, I'm ready for Friday. It sucks that they take the day off.
Well, they have to take it off though because you have the travel considerations. Where if like one team is on the West Coast, one team's on the East Coast, they at least have to have that day to get to, because it's only the one venue for that first round where the higher seeds obviously hosting all three games, so they still need to have time to get to that venue, have time to get acclimated and everything.
So whoever's the highest seed, they're the home team for all three games.
Yeah,
right?
so the Blue Jays are going to host all three games, and then the Guardians will host all three, Cardinals will host all three, and then the Mets will host all three.
All right. At least it's not the opposite way like the WNBA did.
No, so that's why like the first round is going to go Friday through Sunday, and then everybody's going to have off Monday as a travel day, and then the next round is going to start either on Tuesday or Wednesday.
I couldn't believe the WNBA done it that way, where the lower seed had the damn home court advantage in game 3.
Well, the minor league baseball does that too, where it's not really, the lower seed doesn't actually have like home field, but the lower seed actually gets game 1 at home, and then the higher seed gets games 2 and 3 at home. So in a way, yes, the higher seed still has home field, but it could be a disadvantage because if that lower seed wins game 1, you're already down 1-0 going back home.
Well, that's how, like in the WNBA, if you're the lower seed, you lose that game 1, then you have to go on the road for the other games. It's like it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, what are we playing for a seed then?
Right.
No, I think this year's playoffs going to be. I think it has the potential to be real good. Maybe one of the better ones that we've had over the last few years.
I think in terms of just like the competitiveness, I agree with you. And then the other reason why I think it has the potential to be one of the best, if not the best, is you look at all the storylines.
Yep.
Pujols retiring, Yachty retiring, Wainwright retiring. How sweet would it be for the Cardinals to win a World Series for them? You have the potential of a possible Subway Series again, which the last time that happened was the early 2000s. So you have the potential of that happening again. You have the potential of Seattle, who has gone 21 years without making the playoffs. They have a potential to make their first ever World Series. You have Toronto, who hasn't been in the World Series since the early 90s. Last time the Phillies were in the playoffs was when they won the World Series. So, I mean, there's so many storylines. There's so many, there's so many division rivals, too, that could literally take place where not only do they face each other 19 times during the regular season, but now you can get them for a best of 5 and get 5 more games or a best of 7.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, who do you think is going to be the MVP? You think Judge had the MVP wrapped up?
I mean, the guy's going to win a triple. If he doesn't win the Triple Crown, the only thing he's going to lose is batting average to that Jose Miranda from Minnesota, who's, I think, 1 point ahead of him right now. But when you're that close to a Triple Crown, you have to give it to Aaron Judge, especially when he broke or tied Roger Maris's American League home run record. There's really no way that you cannot give it to him, and I'm still trying to – I keep hearing everyone saying that Shohei deserves it more, and I just sit there and I'm like, I'm still trying to figure out the argument you have to tell me that Shohei deserves it more than Aaron Judge, because the only argument you're going to give me is that he's a two-way player. Okay, so Aaron Judge plays in the field every single day. Also, he's not a two-way player, but he's still in the field every single day. So there's really not any arguments that you can make at this point. In terms of the National League, that's a lot more wide open, I think. I mean, you can look at Pete Alonso, who set the Mets single season RBI record, I believe, this year with like 128 or 130. You can put him up there. I would say Freddie Freeman you can put up there again just based off of the year he had, but I still think Paul Goldschmidt's going to win it just because Paul Goldschmidt's putting up better numbers now than when he won the MVP back in 2012.
Yeah, I think Goldschmidt's going to win the National League. And to me, if you're a baseball writer and you vote for Ohtani over Aaron Judge, you shouldn't have a vote.
I can't remember the last time there was a unanimous MVP. But if Aaron Judge is not the unanimous MVP, there's something wrong.
Yeah. I mean, the dude's dominate. I mean, he's been dominating. Like you said, the only thing he might not lead in could be batting average. And that's going to be by maybe a point or two. It's not like he's getting killed there. I don't understand if somehow he don't get the MVP, all them baseball writers need to be stripped. Which I still think they need to change. They need to change that MVP voting a little bit, where it's not just all on the baseball writers like that.
Yeah,
because some of them guys, you know how it is. Some of them guys in the media, they hold grudges against them players if they don't like the way the player talk to them or don't like the accessibility the players give. Some of them guys hold that against them, and it shouldn't be that way.
No, it shouldn't.
All right. Before we get out of here, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover?
Last night was the opening of the Arizona Fall League. So we have the Arizona Fall League underway right now, which...
Are you traveling to any games this week?
Not this week, no. I don't know how familiar you are with the Arizona Fall League or whatever, but that's pretty much... They basically have a lot of the teams' top prospects go to that league. That's kind of their next... What they say the next step, but it's pretty much the final step before they get to the majors. They let them go there for the next month and a half and just do what they can do to get as many at-bats or as many innings as possible, so then once this is done, they can go right into spring training and be ready to go. And then today is also the final qualifiers for the World Baseball Classic. You have Brazil versus Panama at 7 o'clock in the first place game. Winner of that will be team number 19 that qualifies, and then the loser will play tomorrow against the winner of Nicaragua and Argentina.
They having them games on ESPN or?
You got to go to ESPN Plus to find them.
ESPN Plus, okay, yeah, I can find them.
For Nicaragua and Argentina is at 2 o'clock, and then the Brazil-Panama game's at 7.
If you're wanting to watch Aaron Judge try to get 62, Yankees and the Rangers are on at 2 Eastern today on the Major League Baseball Network. I just saw that come up. That's what I watch a lot in the mornings, the MLB Network. I'm not big on some of the ESPN shows in the morning, so I usually turn it over to MLB in the morning. But no, one question about the Arizona League. Then does Fall League? Does each team have a team in that, or do they like
there's
players on different?
It's only 6 teams.
Okay, so they just combine.
So 5 franchises share one team.
Okay,
and typically each franchise will send anywhere from 3 to 7 players down.
Okay. Now, do they televise any of them games where you can watch them?
The playoffs, they will. You can obviously do if you go to minorleaguebaseball.com, you can follow it on the game day, but it's not live streamed. It's just kind of like the pitch by pitch feed. But once the playoffs start for Major League Baseball, you kind of get closer to the World Series. MLB Network does actually put a lot of the Arizona Fall League games on just because once you get to November, there's nothing else on. And that's kind of when the Fall League playoffs start. So then you'll start to see a lot more of that stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, you got any other final thoughts before we get out of here for today?
I do not.
All right. We will see you guys tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern for another episode of Around the Bases. Don't forget, on the ASAP All Sports All Plays Network, you have ASAP in the morning. Be starting probably starting right now. So if you're wanting to listen to some more sports talk, go check them out. They start at 10 o'clock over on All Sports All Plays Network. I'll be back here on the GonzoSportsRoom Network at 3 o'clock with Easy Money, a sports betting show, 3 p.m. Eastern. So come join me for that. I'll also be on the ASAP Sports Network at 1 p.m. Eastern for the ASAP Afternoon Blitz. But we appreciate everybody watching. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll talk some more playoffs. Who knows? We might be talking about Judge hitting number 62. So I know Stat Guy knows all the stuff about the minor league stuff with that fall stuff. So who knows? We might talk more about that. But like I said, I want to thank everybody for watching. Please hit that subscribe button on YouTube at GonzoSportsRoom. Also at the All Sports All Plays Network as well. Follow us on Facebook at GonzoSportsRoom. Please hit that like and follow button. That Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's where I post all the information about all the shows. So please go check that out. But thanks for joining us, and we will see you guys tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern for another episode of Around the Bases.
All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making a plays. We talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.